We're back with another episode of the One Pour Problems podcast, and today I am joined by Drew DiSilvestro, President at AmeriTech Contracting. Super excited to have you on the show today.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for the invite.
Absolutely. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about relentless leadership and specifically building teams that win. And I'm really excited to kind of hear your perspective, the military background, and how you bring that into your leadership style today.
Awesome.
But before we dive into that, I do want to talk a little bit about the drinks that we have here. Tell me why we have old fashions on the show today.
Well, specifically we have Whistle Pig Old Fashions. I wasn't a bourbon guy. I wasn't an old fashioned guy. I was a straight Scotch on the rocks guy for a long time. And when I got involved with AmeriTech, I would go to business functions, business dinners, and one of my business partners in particular, Dan Eastman, would always kind of razz me for ordering just such a bland drink, right? And one day he enticed me enough to order an old fashioned, specifically a Whistle Pig Old Fashioned. It was his drink of choice, and so I tried it and I was hooked. And it has become something that emulates a lot of memories, a lot of emotion, right? Positive emotion to not only a business partner but a friendship. And so now I use it to celebrate. Events, just going and relaxing with the wife or the family, going out with friends, right? Mm-hmm. And always in the back of my mind thinking of Dan Eastman and the partnership that we've built here at AmeriTech.
I love that. And for me, I love this old fashioned. These hit home for me.
Cheers.
Definitely my favorite drink of choice too. So
awesome.
I love it.
And that is a great recipe, Sal.
I've been practicing for quite some time now, so. Awesome. So as we get started here, I'd love to just have you tell our viewers a little bit more about like who you are and your background and what kind of led you to AmeriTech.
Oh, perfect. So I'm Drew DiSilvestro, and I started in the construction field when I was 16 years old. One of my buddy's fathers, he owned a general contracting firm, and specifically he was framing a bunch of homes at the time, and he offered me $10 an hour cash under the table and come, and I said, great, that's great money for a high school kid, right? And so, but immediately I was hooked to the camaraderie and the accomplishment that you felt every day, right? When you would go there, you would set a goal or target and you'd walk away and you'd see things physically built in front of you, right? And so I did that for a couple summers with him and eventually transitioned up to college. I was at Eastern Connecticut. I was working full-time as a framer and I was going to school in the evening time. And I was busting my stones pretty hard to make ends meet. And one of my buddies who was prior military said, hey man, have you ever thought of joining the military? Like, so you don't have to work so hard. And I said, no, and I don't think I'm the fit for the military. And he says, oh, I disagree, I think you are. Long story short, I ended up joining the military. Became an engineer in the military, and I've had an 18 plus year career in the military. I'm currently the SEL, I'm the senior enlisted leader for the operations group at the 103rd up at Bradley, Connecticut. And so I've done a myriad of tours and deployments, but that then, the opportunity that I received in the military then turned into the opportunity of working for the DoD, specifically in the construction side of the house. And so I became a contracting officer's rep, and I was the representative on the jobs that was the expert per se, right, on the contract that would oversee the job on the government through the government's lens, right, and make sure that our contractors were doing a good job. And what I realized when doing that was that they weren't necessarily that great, or there wasn't significant skill sets that they were providing above and beyond anything that I thought I could ever provide. And so in the back of my mind, I always said, hey, I could do this better, and I think I could eventually get into this, right? But I continued to trudge along. And one day an opportunity came up for me to go to the private sector and try to dabble into something outside of government. And so I took that opportunity. With my government experience, I went and worked for a company called QBS out of Ohio. And I became a regional director from Philly all the way to Maine. That became my territory. And I learned the aspects on the private side, right, working for the government, how that worked. And advancement came. I became the VP at another company called Black Horse. And when I made that transition, the transition offered an opportunity for an equity arrangement. Unfortunately, the equity arrangement never really came into fruition, and it became kind of a dead promise. And a dead promise where I necessarily wasn't sitting there and holding a grudge, but it was something that was always sitting in the back of my head, like, hey, is this ever going to actually come and happen? And about 3.5 years ago, 3.25 years ago, 4th of July weekend, my wife decided to book a long weekend at a place in Rhode Island called the Preserve. And
love it.
Yeah, and at the Preserve, it was perfect. Right? We were able to rent a tiny home for include our dogs, and then simultaneously every year we go there for a 4th of July party that our friends hold in Misquamicut. And so we went there for a long weekend, and just expecting it to be a long weekend. I end up meeting the owner of the Preserve, and he ends up introducing me to one of his longtime members there. One of the members also owned a home there, and said, hey, I think that guy does what you do, Drew. You guys should connect. So we connected, we had a conversation, and it came up in conversation that he invested into an organization that currently was struggling. It wasn't panning out the way he thought it was going to pan out. And part of the reason was the original owner ended up getting stage 4 cancer, who was also a veteran. And so, a deal wasn't inked that day, but conversations led up over the course of the next couple of weeks. And I eventually ended up over at AmeriTech. And the vision was I could come over, I could take what we currently had, and I think I could frame it, and I can build this thing out and get it on the right tracks, and then be able to hopefully give Scott, our partner at the time, the opportunity to retire and get well and get better and be with his family.
It's awesome.
And so it all ended up working out.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a great story, and also thank you for your service.
Oh, appreciate it.
For sure.
Thank you.
So I don't know if it's a sensitive topic to talk about, but something that we haven't talked about on the show, and I think it's really interesting, is you mentioned that you took a job with the promise of, an equity play in that, and that ended up not panning out. I would love to hear your advice, if going into that scenario for a second time, what would you do differently?
I think the mistake that I made in that scenario, right? And by the way, I believe everything happens for a reason. So I think it was teeing me up for the opportunity that came with AmeriTech.
Yeah.
But with that being said, the mistake that was made is that I made an assumption that everybody holds the same worth of a handshake agreement that I did, right? Mm-hmm. And so we didn't finalize enough of the details, and nothing was memorialized. And so what I would say is, if you decide to put all your eggs in a basket, and it's paired with the opportunity for undefined or ambiguity in a business dealing, to make sure that you cross your T's and dot your I's, mm-hmm. get that taken care of before you move too intimately or too fast forward into a relationship, so you're not disappointed on the end.
Yeah, and I feel like that's an uncomfortable position to be in, right? Because you're like, man, I'm happy to be here, happy to have this opportunity to get equity and whatever the deal is, right, that you're working towards.
Yes.
And so you're like, I don't want to be too aggressive and ruffle feathers or something like that, but there is a right way to do that, so that way if something were to not go the way that you wanted, you have those I's dotted and T's crossed. So I love that advice. I
think it comes down to the way you able to position conversations, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that comes down to the same thing with having hard conversations in business in general, right? Mm-hmm. Is if you go in there and you set the expectations of what you're trying to accomplish in the meeting mm-hmm. in advance, to just all of a sudden hitting them with it and them not expecting it, then you can at least, even if you don't walk away that day with any kind of resolve, you at least know, hey, this is what I need on my end to feel comfortable to move forward in a scenario. Mm-hmm. And how do we potentially get there? And if we don't get there, that's fine. We can still be friends, but this relationship's just not for me.
Yeah.
And I think that what everyone has to sometimes remember and realize is that everybody on the other side is also a human. They also have emotions. They also have outside influences that you have no idea about.
Yep.
But if you can set the table prior to going in and have the conversation, you can make a significant headway in the direction you're looking to make.
Yeah, I love that. And, I think that ties into, our first topic about like persistence, right? And, not being afraid to like go after the things that you want. And so you told us that you have a mantra, that tomorrow is a mystical, magical land. So take care of it now. How has that shaped the way that you approach, your business goals?
Yeah. So my saying is tomorrow's mystical, magical land that doesn't exist. So do it now. Right. And I think everybody can probably relate to this, right? The individual at work, even themselves, that's like, I'll just take care of it tomorrow. It's procrastination. Right. And so you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Right. Yep. Life can throw you a fastball in an instant. Right. And so if there's the opportunity to take care of it now, even if that means we got to stay an extra 10 minutes, an extra hour, whatever it may be, if we can deal with it now and address it, it gets something off of our quote unquote to-do list for the following days, and it gets us that closer to whatever the end goal is that we're pursuing. And so it's not for everybody, that mindset, and it takes some time to train yourself to think through that, right? And it comes with prioritizing, right? So if you have, I'm not saying skip out on your family, your kid's softball game or little league or dance recital. What I'm saying is you got to go and you got to prioritize. And if you can get that low hanging fruit accomplished, let's get it done. Because of the unknowns, right? That would potentially stop momentum the following day that we're not anticipating, because unknowns happen every day in business.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like that happens in our business a ton as well, right? Where it's like, all right, I can, potentially address one of these issues today, or, I might just push that one off until tomorrow. And then you get in the morning, there's fire drills everywhere, right? Yeah. People are having issues all over the place. Yeah. And, you just set yourself even further back, where now something that you could have done yesterday, you might not even get to, today. If not, it might be another day in the past or in the future. So, there's something to be said about trying to attack those things, as quickly as you can to get them done.
Especially when there's a ripple effect, right? If something that you have to take care of, then there's a chain workflow after you of other individuals. Yeah. If you could have got it done Tuesday night instead of Thursday morning, right? Your task might have been fully accomplished by Thursday with all the other individuals that it potentially affects.
Yep.
But as soon as that happens, if you get it done Thursday, now it probably doesn't happen until Monday because it really needed 2 solid days to get done or whatever it may be. So.
And so how do you take those, specific, whether it's tasks or, bigger projects or things that you're like, hey, let's get it done now. What's your, process to figure out, like, is this worth doing right now versus pushing off?
So I don't believe in time management. I believe in priority management. I don't think that anybody's ever going to have enough time in the day to do everything that they really would want to get done in that day. It's just impossible. Nothing's impossible, but it's probably unlikely, right? And so what you need to do is, and you need to constantly rack and stack what you have for priorities, and depending on where you are within your organization, right, how it affects the other moving parts. Yep. Sometimes you might rack something tighter on top because that there's a longer workflow that will take to get that accomplished. Even if you're like, well, this really doesn't have to happen and finish complete till Friday, but it's Monday. Well, I'm the first in the chain of custody here, so I got to get it done so I can anticipate that it'll be done by Friday. If I wait until Thursday and get my piece done, yeah, I'm getting it done by Friday, but is the rest of my team getting it done by Friday? Or am I putting undue stress on my team to get it done by Friday when I could have helped out and got it done on Monday itself, right? So, like I said, I believe in the priority management and looking at it, and I don't think that it's necessarily something that gets re-racked and stacked on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. I think it's in a moment basis as things come up, right? You said fires happen, right? Fire drills happen at your business, happens at AmeriTech too, right? And all of a sudden it needs Drew's presence there, right? Yep. Or somebody on my senior leadership team's presence there. Well, we're going to take that as number one priority, jump on it if it needs that, right? Get it addressed, and then go back and look at, okay, what's the rest of the day look like? What can we potentially push? What has to happen now? and then how does it affect everybody else?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And, earlier in my leadership journey, I definitely struggled in priority management, right? Because there were so many fires. I did everything that came my way, and there was like a day I woke up and I was like, I literally have no idea what's on my schedule today. Like, I'm just doing stuff, right, that like people are putting there and saying they need me for, and things that like I could be like, you can handle that. I don't need to be involved here. I trust you to make that decision. And I ended up utilizing a framework called the Eisenhower Matrix, right? And it's like you're determining things between urgency and importance level. And then that's how you're like framing, what are the things I need to do right now? What are the things I should do and schedule out? What should I delegate? And what should I just never, ever be doing?
Yeah.
And so, using frameworks and stuff like that for me has allowed me to kind of operate in a similar way to the way that you think.
Yeah, no, that's when people want time from me specifically, unless it's an urgent phone call, we ask for an agenda. And if you can't provide an agenda, it's not important enough for us to have a sit down and have a meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know it's disappointing sometimes to my team members, right, because they want to get the FaceTime with the president, but. My executive assistant team is constantly racking and stacking all the other obligations or thoughts that people want to get in front of me. Mm-hmm. And they only can do so by knowing exactly what you're trying to say, and that's by an agenda.
Yeah, for sure. And so we were talking about persistence, right? And so do you have like a specific story where like persistence played a role in either, success in the business or even a failure in the business?
So early on when I took AmeriTech over, it was me and Scott, the original founder, and myself, and we had no real backlog of opportunity. And in the construction world, you always are looking at your backlog of work so that you can constantly figure out how do you staff up, staff down, and prioritize personnel, right? Well, I didn't have that problem, and so the first 2 months, my goal there was I just got to sell. Right, and so lucky enough, I was able to ink about $10 million in sales off the rip. And now it's like, okay, you did that, Drew. Now you got to go figure out and find a team to execute it. And so that was what my journey was. And so I was really hyper focused on building the execution, the operations. I stopped really focusing on the sales aspect because I had more than enough sales already inked to at least keep me going for a portion of time. Mm-hmm. And Dan, my business partner, came to me and he said, hey, we got to consider bringing in somebody that just constantly is driving to the government facilities and introducing them to AmeriTech and telling them about our capabilities and what we can potentially provide. And I said, hey, man, it's not something we really can afford right now, and it's not something that I'm really looking to prioritize. And he goes, it's not something we can, and he says, it's not something we can do without. And wow. He goes, we have to be constantly in their face, and so his persistence to me, finally, 2 months in, 3 months in, I said okay, and I went and I actually recruited over one of my good friends, and he's also a business partner now with us at AmeriTech, Dan Riley, into our organization specifically to just drive the outreach interactions, yeah. Right? And so what I get with that is, there was no return on his investment for a solid 6-7 months. It was just constantly paying for travel to going in and out of New England, right? And you pay for hotels because there's overnights and all that, and lots of money being spun out. But the persistence of constantly getting in front of people, telling them what we can do, eventually landed this opportunity of saying, hey, we got this small opportunity. We just said yes, we'll do it, right? We'll figure it out. We did it. We executed well. And then it springboarded to a much larger opportunity, and it can continue and so on and so forth. And that's how we organically grew the name of AmeriTech out there initially at first. But it was that persistence and that drive, not only from Dan Eastman saying, hey, you got to bring a guy in, but then of Dan Riley constantly on endless trips, getting in front of people, yeah. Telling them the same story over and over again, where it resonated enough where we finally got that opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you got to have, you gotta have the ability to take some risks, especially early on in the organization, and having him kind of push you to be like, we can't go without it, is a that's a game changing way to tell somebody you need to do something,
Yeah.
right? It's like, you don't need to do this. We can't not do this,
Yeah.
right? And so sounds like it's paid off. And, you know, those are the things that you're like, all right, I can look back and say, like, these are the decisions that I've made and, you know, they've panned out. And so I can make similar calls and moves in the future. Obviously, it's at a different scale now that you've continued to scale the organization. But it's the mantra of, like, you know, not being afraid to make some of those calls. So
Yeah.
it's cool.
I had a conversation yesterday, and I forgot who I was talking to on the phone, but they said, you know, Drew, the difference between you and a lot of other individuals has been that you aren't scared of success. And sometimes I think people believe that they want the niceties of success, but they don't want all the hard work and the effort and what it takes to be successful. And the people that just are willing to take the risks, calculated risks, right, and willing to put the time and effort into, will ultimately, you know, give them that success that they're hoping and striving for.
Do you think that has anything to do with your military background?
I think the discipline aspect of my life the military has definitely paid into that. I think my leadership style and my ability to work with all kinds of walks of life has been, you know, military has helped me palate that and figure that out.
Yeah.
In the military, right, when people sign up and they enlist for, you know, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, whatever it may be. Well, guess what? You're not on the board to say if they're going to be coming to your organization or not. The recruiter puts them into your place and says, hey, man, this person's now in your unit for X amount of years. And you as a supervisor, you can't say, well, I don't want them, I want to fire them. They have a government contract. They're there whether you want them or you don't want them.
Yeah, wow.
And so what the military, you know, specifically has taught me is how to work with individuals that don't necessarily fit the mold in certain aspects of the military where they are placed. And how do we work with them? How do we figure out how to utilize them? I don't believe that anybody wakes up and says, you know, I'm going to be a dirtbag today. I just don't feel like doing my job, right?
Yeah.
Really, people wake up and they want to do well,
Yeah.
but they just don't necessarily know what they don't know. And it's on us as leaders, as management personnel, to provide that redirection, to give them a view into what we see and why we see it that way, but to be empathetic enough to ask, you know, what the potentially is going on and why are they acting out or they're not performing well, because there might be outside factors, you know, we got to weigh in. And so I think being forced to utilize who the military gives you, right, and not just being like, I don't want them, move them off my team, I don't want them, fire them, right, has taught me how to work with all walks of life and how to be kind of a chameleon in different settings, so I can make it all work with whoever's in the room.
Yeah. So let's pull on that thread a little bit more, because that is very different than a lot of the perspectives that I've received, you know, talking with the leaders here, you know, on the previous episodes, because you don't have the opportunity in the military to say you don't want this person on your team. And so it sounds like, you know, obviously using that in your own organization and figuring out ways to work with individuals, you know, how has that benefited you, right? Because I'm assuming because of that, there's less like turnover, and so then there's an ability for more knowledge to stay in the organization. There's less like retraining and rework and stuff like that. So, you know, how has that benefited you?
I think it's benefited me in, one, being able to talk to my senior leadership, my middle management teams as well when needed, to say, when they say, hey, I don't think this person is going to work out. For being able to kind of flip the script on them, be devil's advocate, and then start asking them, hey, what have you done on your end when you looked yourself in the mirror to make sure that, you know, John Smith is actually going to be successful in the position that we have him in, right? Have you done everything in your power to ensure that this person can succeed? And I can tell you a lot of the time people look at me and they're like, well, no. And so I say, okay, so what can we do to give them the environment to potentially succeed? Now, not everybody's going to succeed because sometimes there's attitude problems. Sometimes there's different things that play into it. But did we do everything we possibly could to ensure that we tried our darnest? And so I think that aspect and it has helped me out tremendously with AmeriTech. I think the other part of it is sometimes there are individuals that just aren't fits for what we thought they would be good at AmeriTech, but they have other intangible skill sets that we can utilize in other portions of our organization. And so we've done some transformation with individuals. We said, hey, I don't think this individual is working out here, but I believe that person might work out over here. So let's figure that out and try it out. And instead of just shipping them off and saying, hey, it didn't work out here, good luck, right? So I think that's helped me out tremendously, and I believe that's what one of the traits that sets AmeriTech apart.
So how do you actively work with your team to be able to explain to them the difference between coming to you and complaining versus speaking up effectively? Yeah.
So if somebody's going to come to me with a problem, right, my expectation is that they're coming to me with all angles and potential solution, right? This is the first time ultimately that I'm hearing of this issue or this problem. So I have no information, right? I'm in fact gathering mode, right? And so I'm looking for, I guess, my experts, my division heads, whoever it is, to provide me, hey, this is what's currently going on, but these are the potential solutions. And if we go in these directions, these are the ripple effects that are potentially going to happen, so that we can make a decision in that scenario. I'm also a big believer in making decisions based off of facts and not emotion. And so sometimes, people come and they want to, and they say, we got a problem. And I then look at them and go, is it really a problem, or is somebody's ego hurt? And they're like, good question. And I said, sounds like to me there's an ego involved, right? And let's go back and let's look at that, right? Analyze it and see how do we potentially correct their empathetic way of looking at it, or what's happening. Can we drop all the egos and can we just move forward?
Yeah, there's some similarities in the way that you operate and the way that we do at Charles IT too. We during every employee onboarding, we kind of walk through some slides of how you should operate as a Charles IT employee.
That's cool.
And one of them specifically says we want solutions, not problems.
Yeah.
And we draw from a book called Turn the Ship Around, where there's a naval captain that
I read it.
Yeah, that teaches people to say, I intend to do this, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so I intend tos are huge in our organization. That is how we operate. And
really
so
cool.
You're not able to go to somebody just to bitch about something, right? You're going to them to be able to say hey, I intend to do this because I tried this didn't work, and I think this is the next viable path. Can I do that, right? And so coming up with those solutions to those things and identifying issues that we have, but bringing solutions for those issues, it's huge in continuing to push an organization forward.
Yeah. Story about that. So when I actually got back from Afghanistan, I was a young airman. I was in my early 20s, and I was always excelled very well in the military, right? I was good. I was what they call the hard charger. I was a fast burner. I made rank fast. But I also, at the time, didn't understand the power that comes with being maybe more of a successful airman than being just an average airman, right? And unfortunately, in Afghanistan, I would complain about all the problems I was seeing and just bitch. And it wasn't really a good environment for me or anybody that was around me at that time. And when I got back, somebody gifted me that book and said, hey, you got to start to really look at what can you do to help solve the problem, instead of just saying there's a problem and then dropping the mic, right, as Mambo would say, and just walking away, right? And I was like, okay. So that really started on my journey of my mindset and changing my mindset around and realizing that, okay, things are going to stink. Things are not going to go well. There's going to be problems. There's going to be issues. But is there anything that I intend to do to potentially make it better?
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And I think, everyone that looks at leaders think they have it all figured out, right? Like you know everything,
Yeah.
like you have all the tools that you need. But I love that you're like, hey, I need to, get this book. It's going to change my mindset. And like, I feel like in leadership, like you're always learning, you're always adapting, and specifically with the people that, the change in the employee type that we have now coming into the workforce and stuff is forcing all of us to learn different skills and how to adapt. And so I love that that's something that you like spend some time, you're focused on, and you're using actively.
Yeah, I believe in constant learning. I believe in constant training, and especially when it comes to leadership. Currently, I'm working with Learning Dynamics, a company out of Wallingford, Connecticut, to come on board and develop a leadership training course right now for my executive leadership team. But my plan is to start to eventually for my senior leadership team, and then eventually my middle management team, right? Because I believe that that's a skill set that needs to constantly be tweaked and honed in on and worked at and learned.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. I love the investing in the team. It's awesome. So let's talk a little bit specifically about like your business and your clients. Okay. So, how does selling specifically to like government entities, differ from like other business opportunities, right? It's a completely different beast.
Yeah. Selling
into government agencies. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So in the government, right, the saying goes, lowest bid wins, right, is how it goes, not as much as you would think, but it's a big element, right? So price definitely plays a factor, right? Sometimes there's what we call rip and reads, where you lowest bid, they rip it, you win it, and as long as you have the bonding and the banking, it's your gig, right? But there's others where you have to build technical packages, and you have to tell a story about how you're going to, at least in construction, how you're going to execute on the actual project at hand. The things that you think potentially you could run into that would be cause a problem, the contingencies that you have planned out and thought about if you do run into those problems, and how do you plan to stay on budget and on schedule, right? Mm-hmm. But there's not a monster marketing effort that really happens in the government sector, right? Because you go on sam.gov, the solicitations are there, and you bid in accordance to what these RFPs are, but it's not like somebody's just calling you out of the yellow pages or going to Google and type it in.
Yellow pages.
Yeah, exactly. I don't do marketing. No, but going to Google, right, and finding you there, right, and calling you up and saying, hey, I like Drew and I like what AmeriTech has to say, so we're going to hire them, right? The government's got to do their due diligence, and they have to make it competitive, and it has to go through a whole process, right? So what I can tell you is when you do get the opportunity with the government, right, the saying yes, providing solid customer service, going above and beyond when you can, and executing within time and within budget pays significant dividends for you getting positive reviews back, right, that you can utilize in your packages that you build back to the government. Yep. And so they're called, past performance questionnaires, or CPARs. I always joke around saying it's like the Google review for the government itself, right? Yep. And telling the story about AmeriTech coming in, and they did another exceptional job on this project, and they did it within cost, and they did it within budget. Mm-hmm. Versus having a full street team out there pitching the name of AmeriTech, right? Going to vendor shows and saying, hey, the AmeriTech can come provide these general contracting services, sending out flyer mailing campaigns, and or having people, canvass neighborhoods, knocking on doors and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, are you interested in a new roof, right? Mm-hmm. Totally different animal. But I think all the marketing that you do for any organization always will go back to, okay, well, you got them in the door. Mm-hmm. We're in the door. We're here to provide you a service. can we now execute and provide what we promised we're going to do? And I think the companies that survive in any industry, no matter if you're selling for government, private sector, residential, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, right, whoever it is did I do what I said I was going to do, and did I provide exceptional customer service? Mm-hmm. And if you do, it's going to spread like wildfire, and people are going to want a piece of you somehow. They're going to figure it out, even in the government.
Yep.
Right. But if you're just subpar or so, they're going to look for that the next person down the road because they didn't have that wow experience that they were looking for.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like, I guess from my experience, so I spent the early part of my career as an auditor for the state of Connecticut. And so I got a little bit of taste of government work, but on the state level. But it was slow as molasses.
I bet.
Like, it was rough. There would be things like I'd be looking for a copy of a spreadsheet from someone at an agency, and it would take them weeks to get it to me.
Archaic.
Yeah. And so, how do you work with your team to be able to, deal with some of those like longer drawn out processes that are part of, working with the government?
So we always do everything we possibly can in the moment to tee it up so that it's out of our hands and it's in the government's hands, right? We can't control how long it's going to take for the government or the personnel in the government to get through all the red tape necessary to execute on something with AmeriTech, whether it's a contract, a modification, any kind of physical documents, right? We're at the mercy of them.
Yep.
But what we can control is making sure we provide everything that we need to in a timely manner, going back to tomorrow's mystical magical land that doesn't exist, right? Yep. So they have everything at their fingertips so that when they finally do come to it, they're not calling us on the phone or emailing us and saying, I got everything but part A, right? Or part B, right? And I need that. And now we finally get it to them. We get them the additional pieces. And now we're waiting again. We're in the waiting game again, right? Getting everything there. And so we do that through workflow processes within our organization. We do that through checklist processes. I believe in redundancy on lots of things. And so making sure like we're over communicating, over providing, so that way when AmeriTech's tag number does get pulled, to finally take a look and review our stuff, we're good to go.
Mm-hmm. So that makes total sense to me, and we've talked a bunch about like the sales side of it, but that plays a little bit more into like the talent side and having the right people, to be able to make sure that those the packages that you put through are complete, that they have everything that they need. Like, what's your philosophy, and like what traits do you look for in some of the people that you hire and bring onto the team?
Strong communication skills, right, is big. Integrity. I can't work with anybody that doesn't have integrity, right? Things are going to go wrong. Things are not going to go right. I don't need a story. I just need somebody willing to tell the truth, right? And we can work through it. Yeah. I'm always looking for somebody that is going to provide. I don't want somebody to provide me what they think is the right answer. I want them to provide me what they know, factual information, so we can make a decision, and then we'll work through it that way. Relentless drive, relentless hustle, right? Mm-hmm. And the want to always like self-improve and learn and get better, right? Because we don't know everything, but we can get better. We can strive to get better. And if you don't have a passion to get better and you're okay with mediocrity or whatever it is, then you're just not the right fit, at least for me or the AmeriTech team. Yeah,
and I think those are all core, characteristics of what makes a good employee. So it makes total sense why that's, some of the things that you're looking for. I know that, when you guys started, right, how many people was the organization when you joined?
It was me and Scott.
You and Scott. And so where are you guys today?
We're, I think, 73, 74 employees.
Yep.
Sorry, HR, might be a little higher. But we've grown from, like I said, it was me and when Scott could come in between his doctor's appointments, figuring it out. And I was handed a Dropbox of unorganized files of like things kind of archived, not really, and went from there and developed internal, filing sharing system that I knew could become scalable, right? I remember when I brought one of my first employees on, Sean Coles, and he's like, hey man, like, why do we have all these steps? It's just you and me. And I was like, we have all the steps and we're figuring it out so that way when we scale to multiple employees, right, we have a process that's in place that makes sense. And so we can work through those issues now, hopefully, so it becomes scalable. And he's like, oh, I get it. And I remember when we hit 10 employees, 15, whatever it was, employees, he came to me, he's like, Drew, I see it now. I see what you're talking about, right? So it was just me. Now we're at 73, 74. Probably be north of 90 by the end of the year.
Amazing.
We're all over the country. So we're not just in the Northeast right now. We have employees, out in Texas, out in the Midwest, down in Florida. So we're all over the map, and to be determined, but hopefully worldwide eventually.
That's very cool. And so I know, from my own experience, like starting a team when it was, small, 2 people is amazing. But, those first hires and people you're bringing on, a lot of them are like generalists, right? Like they just need to be able to do a lot of shit. Like you need the help.
That's true, man. 100%.
And so, now things have changed. You're in the 70s, HR, we'll find out the exact number, but, getting to 90, you're starting to bring on more like specialized people, right?
Exactly.
How has that transition looked for you, from like specific skill sets and stuff like that? Yeah,
so early on, right? Well, not only early on are you looking for generalists, but you got to be budget friendly. Like, it's not like you have the top dollar to bring in the best project manager out there, right? So you're looking for generalists, and you're also looking for budget friendly. And so I think the military's experience of me being able to be a chameleon and work with most people, right? And adapt to their different like soft skills, played heavy-handed in our success early on, because I was able to bring in people that maybe other individuals didn't think had much talent or could really provide anything of significant value back, and figuring out ways to like squeeze that out of them. As we continue to scale, there was people that we first brought on our organization that just ended up weeding themselves out naturally, or just didn't become a fit, because they say you get corporate, you have to get more structured as you grow and scale, like not to the point where it's corporate, but you have to have things in place, right? Or you're gonna be caught with your pants down, right? It's just not feasible to scale and grow an organization, right? Yeah. So as we continue to grow and scale our organization, some of those individuals have stayed on. Sean Coles was my first employee that I brought on, and he's still with our organization today, right? And he was more of a generalist of doing lots of different things, and now he's just hyper focused on the pre-construction and the execution of the construction internal administration process of our organization right now, right? And so now we're able to go find specific, hyper focus on specific talented individuals, right? That are really good at one thing or a couple of different things, that can pay significant dividends back to the organization, because it demands that at this moment.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And again, from my own experience in scaling Charles IT to where we are, like that's the fun part, right? Yeah. It's like seeing the changes, the different style of like the people and the things that you're looking for, and how the process change. And like I remember when I first started, I had a computer that, wouldn't hold a charge for more than 30 minutes. And I used to have to ask people to get up and move in the conference room so I could get close to the outlet. And, now we have we're able to afford to be able to get like nicer laptops. Correct. And like all that kind of stuff. And so it's always fun to talk to people who have done that same thing and kind of gone through that journey. So.
Yeah, the hand-me-down furniture.
Yep.
When I brought my first guy in, just hyper focus on estimating. His training was a plastic table in my desk, and I was like, "Hey man, you're just gonna have to watch over my shoulder because I have many other things going on. And when I can get to you, I'll be able to turn to you." And for the first 2 months, bless Paul Kashiba, man, he just sat there and just soaked up everything I could give him when I could give him time.
Yeah.
And learned that way.
Yeah, it is crazy, some of the things that you have to do when you're trying to scale. So,
yeah.
So as we transition to the end of the episode, what would you say is like a piece of advice that you'd give to leaders that are trying to scale their business, but also want to like maintain culture, and performance?
Be authentic, right? Be who you are, who you want to be, who you know you can be, right? You're in that position and you're able to scale for a reason, right? And so trying to fit in a mold that isn't you, it's, you maybe can fake it for 6 months, a year, maybe even a couple of years, I don't know. But eventually you're gonna be exposed and it's not gonna work out, and then you're gonna have all of a sudden on your hands a culture that you can't identify with, right? And you're gonna have struggles fitting into your own culture, which is gonna cause toxic leadership around you, right? So be authentic, be genuine. And then the last piece of advice is constantly find individuals that you can surround yourself that are good sounding boards, right? Because there's many nights and many days, right? I'm sure you know this, Sal, where you're just in your own head and you're just thinking through things, and are you making the right decision, right? Nobody else is really in your corner when you're on top of the mountain wearing the crown yourself, trying to figure it out, right? And so having people to soundboard off of and a strong support system in that aspect is huge too.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and giving your perspective. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure our viewers did too. Thank you for your service. And for those who don't know, congrats again on winning the Harvard Business Journal 40 Under 40. It's quite the accomplishment.
I appreciate being on the show, and thank you so much for having me.